AM 1150 Garden Show. Ken Salvail here today, answering your gardening questions. Give us a call today and let us know, how are you handling the temperatures that we've been having here this past couple of weeks? And let us know how your plants are doing. See if we're experiencing as much, let's say, sort of sunburn, on our plants as we're seeing on people. It certainly is warm out there. I think we're expecting another 33, 34 degrees Celsius day here. So, hang on. We're in for it for another few weeks, I'm sure, at least. So we have to adapt. That's all we have. That's all we can do. But anyway, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in today to the AM 1150 Garden Show. And so we will start the show, as we always do, with the tips of the week. Alrighty, my tip of the week is to remove dead heads from all plants when you see them blooming, or as soon as they finish blooming, so they don't spread their seeds around. And this is one of the key things, whether it's a perennial plant in the garden, or whether it's an annual plant in your planters, or especially weeds. And so it's funny that you deadhead your perennials and things. It helps to keep them blooming, but it also prevents them from spreading around and seeding everywhere. Well, if you don't have time to pull your weeds, at very least, deadhead them and get rid of those seed heads. Get them down into the bottom of a bucket where they can go ahead and bloom if they want, but at least they're down in the bottom of a bucket. There you go. That's my tip. And my plant of the week this week is basil. And this particular plant is really in its heyday right now. We're having a hot, dry summer, and that's really what basil seems to like. It is a tropical plant, and it originated, I think, from anywhere from Central Africa, I guess, up into Asia. But it's that's where it's native to. But it's an annual that just thrives in heat and warmth, and people have problems with it because they plant it too early. So that's the whole thing with basil. But it sure is having fun out there now. It's enjoying this really sunny, warm weather. So, all right, that's my tips and plants for this week. Remember to check growercoach.com. All righty, so we're here today talking about some of these topics that are just, obvious in the gardening biz, and that is that, water is an issue. We're having probably the driest year that I can ever remember. I don't know if there's ever been a year where it's been drier, but we all have to conserve water, but we have to put water where it's needed and only where it's needed. So some of the things that we like to talk about here on the Garden Show is just sort of the general techniques of watering plants. And if you're a regular listener, you may have heard me talk about the way that you have to slowly soak plants, like if they get really, really dry. And sometimes I'll even just put the hose on them and just let it literally like drip, like just that drip, 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 and you just put that hose there, just just letting it drop like that, and then leave it for an hour or so, and it'll slowly soak an area, and it'll really give a plant a really good soaking. Now, newly planted plants, anything that whether it's a planter or if it's a whole entire garden or if it's a landscape that you've just recently planted, we really have to do hand watering on those plants almost daily to keep them alive in these temperatures. So, we just are putting it out there that we need to make sure that we recommend, that you're just have that heightened awareness. And so newly planted plants really need your attention, but plants that are just in the landscape that have been there for years and years, they don't really need the water so much. They do need it for sure, but the spacing between the waterings, so how often you water, can be greatly reduced. And that's just because these plants have been in the ground for sometimes 10 or 20 years, and the roots are well established, and they've rooted out everywhere. And, they've found ways to find their own water. And that's the type of plant that maybe once every couple of weeks you can give it a little extra by hand. But most of those older plants really don't need much for water supply, especially species like junipers. A lot of the juniper families, they don't even really need water. They're so drought tolerant. And if you've grown them for years and years, you've got a big juniper bank. They're those big old juniper banks. You don't really have to water those. So if you want to cut back a little bit on water, that's one thing you can do, is just shut down those big old juniper banks, because they are tough as nails and they actually like it to be dry in the summertime. So there you go. That's an additional tip for today. But again, we do invite your calls, 862-2525, to get through to me today, and we'll do our best here to answer your gardening questions and to again, just to chat. These temperatures have been causing a lot of issues with plants. You know, I was just doing a training session with some of my staff here in the past week, and we were showing off these different plants, how even though we had the same plant, let's say, in about 6 or 8 pots, and they're just these are actually a type of PG hydrangea. And this particular plant they're pretty tough normally, but any plant in a pot is going to be more susceptible to drought. And the general rule is if a plant is growing in a pot, you have to water it every single day, and sometimes more than once a day. And these plants, through the heat wave we had there about a week or so ago, that heat wave was really burning plants up, whether they were wet or dry. And that was something that, just as, again, a heightened awareness, is that no matter how much water we're giving those plants, they're still going to show heat stress. They're still going to get crispy leaves. They're still going to get sunburn on the leaves. The thing with plants is they can't go and run into a shady spot and sit there and wait for the heat to go. You know, they're stuck out there. So, you know, I think the tolerance for that, you know, just has to be relaxed. Remember that plants that do suffer some sunburn or some leaf scorch, they will drop those leaves eventually, or you can pinch the leaves off and they'll just regrow some new leaves. So just a normal part of the heat of summer and the normal part of when a heat wave hits. And, you know, interestingly enough, that when a heat wave like that hits, sometimes it's just not possible to keep the grass, your lawn, from browning out. It's just going to brown out. Again, the lawn doesn't have an option to chase the shade or anything. It's stuck out there. And, you know, when you water well, but you still have to follow the watering restrictions. And as a suggestion, I always recommend that you do water, you know, to the proper depth. So I often recommend creating some type of a soil probe, which can just be literally a hollow tube. And you can push that into the earth, or just take your shovel and cut a little bit of an opening into your lawn and pop it up and have a look underneath and see what's going on. You know, guessing at how much water your lawn has or what's going on under there doesn't really work all that well. But just having a look, that's the way to do it, and that's the way to really thoroughly understand what's going on out there. So one thing that I've noticed, when you have a lawn area and then you have this big sort of brown patch in the middle, it could be that the sprinklers are maybe not overlapping that area enough. But, you know, usually if I use a little soil probe or even a piece of rebar or something, and I just go along and I kind of push it into the earth and I'm feeling around to see what's underneath there. And you're sort of testing, like, how deep is the topsoil? And when I go through some areas, I'm pushing it into the earth and it's going into about maybe even 10 inches or even 12 inches deep in some areas. And it's, you know, that's a really good bit of knowledge there that, wow, I've got 12 inches of topsoil under my lawn. And then you'll go along, and as you approach these dry spots, you might find that 12 inches quickly turns into 3 inches and turns into 2 inches and sometimes only 1.5 inches. And you'll be hitting hard gravel or hard compacted soil. And when you hit that, you know what the problem is. It has nothing to do with irrigation or anything. It's just the poor little plants. They just don't have any soil to root into. And if you don't have decent depth of topsoil, well, then you don't have that reservoir of moisture to last between waterings. So this is why when you install a lawn in the first place, you want to make sure you have a nice deep topsoil to start with, because it does act as a reservoir. It doesn't have to, you know, keep it alive for a month, but it has to keep it alive at least between the waterings. And so, just as an additional tip for today, if you know of anybody who's doing landscaping and you're doing sod installations, the recommended preparation depth is 10 inches. And that just means that, you are digging in. You can put 3 inches or 4 inches of really nice topsoil on the top, but then you need to sort of either rototill it in or something and prepare that upper layer of soil so that it can hold moisture. So there you go, another landscaping tip for you. And thanks again for everybody tuning in today. We should have a great show today, and it really involves your calls. So give us a call, 862-2525, to get through to me today. And we'll be back right after these messages with more AM 1150. Alrighty, we're back. And, thanks again for tuning in today. It's a beautiful Saturday here in the sunny Okanagan. And it's looking great out there, but it is hot and smoky. And I've heard that there are some wildfires around the region, so we want to watch for that. Up towards the Vernon area, I heard there is a something going on up there, a fire. So if you want to check in with friends and neighbors, people that you know, and make sure they're safe, I'm sure that's perfectly acceptable. The weather's been good. The lake is warming up, and the gardens are growing. And this is something that, for me, our vegetable garden's been really, really great. And the basil I was talking about was my plant of the week. Is just it's just flourishing right now. It was slow to establish. We really don't plant the basil out until we get into June. The basil is just not happy with temperatures that are at all cool. They need to go outside in June. So, like, if I was going to seed basil, I probably wouldn't even seed it until I'm into May. And so I'd grow it indoors, maybe, and get it germinating and get it under grow light and get it up and going there. And then, definitely something that you have to really watch as far as the basil goes is that it needs to have bright, bright light and constant warmth, and especially at night. And it's one of the things that we've been having is these really warm evenings, and that's really been helping the basil crops. And because it is a foliage plant, it loves nitrogen, so it loves food, so it's a heavy feeder. So if you want to grow nice basil, you feed it, and you do deadhead it, which was also my tip of the week this week, was about deadheading. And with basil, you just pinch out those flowers as they come on, and that helps to encourage the plant to bush up, and it keeps the foliage looking great. And it's just a fabulous plant. So we usually look at harvesting of basil once we get into August. We can usually be doing pretty well with it. It doesn't take very long to get growing, but pinching it back always gets it to branch out. The key is really feeding and having a relatively regular water supply, sort of typical of vegetable gardens. This year our beans are just doing fabulous. Our pole beans, they've shot right up, and they're up over about 7 feet high right now, and they're producing some beans. Remember that your beans are going to go through some different phases depending on temperature. And so when it does get hot, it depends on the variety as well, is that you will find that sometimes those the beans in hotter temperatures, they may not flower as much. They may start to produce flower buds, but the buds just don't come through to fruition. But as soon as the nights cool off a little bit, and sort of this change happens, especially once you get into August, we still have hot days, but the nights start to cool down a bit, and definitely that triggers those plants to really get into bloom and really start producing. So what I've found is that the bottom part of the plant has been producing quite nicely, and the top part has grown like crazy, and just haven't seen a whole lot of flowers on those yet. But I'm expecting a good crop. And again, try different varieties. The way to have success in the vegetable garden is really just trying different varieties. Even talking to your friends and neighbors and anybody you know is having success, and get the names of those varieties that they're having success with and give it a try. Here in the Okanagan, we're in a desert situation, and I mean, this year is really, really desert-like. I mean, it's been hot and sunny every day since, February. It's just been unbelievably dry. But for vegetable production, you need to get the seed varieties of vegetables that are really heat tolerant, that can handle these hot summers. And it really works well with everything from lettuce to beans and through radishes and even all your cabbage family, the brassicas. If you do a little more research on it and try to learn those varieties and which ones are just able to survive the heat, you will have better success. I know this year I was growing some celery, and I tried two main varieties that I was trying, and the plan there was, again, is pick two varieties that are heat tolerant, which I was able to find, and plant those in, and then just observe. So just seeing, is one better than the other? They're both heat tolerant varieties, but how are they going to grow? So I don't know, because my soil is unique. It's way different than your soil, and it's different than pretty much anybody's soil. So you have to find plants that work for you in your garden. And so the best way to do that is to switch it up. If you're not having success with one variety, change it. Often, let's say with carrots, for example, I would often try two varieties each year so that I'm narrowing it down as quickly as I can. If I was really into carrots, I might even try three varieties and plant like an entire carrot patch with like 3 rows of each type of carrot and see which one performs the best for me and my soil. And when I do that, man, I'm going to hit it. I'm going to hit it out of the park with at least one of those varieties. But keeping track of them and writing the names down and just paying attention to those details. And when you do hit it right and you find the one you're having success with, then make that note, write it down, and next year you'll be right on the money. Just plant the one variety and you're good to go. Remember always to rotate your crops. So in the vegetable gardening world, it's what we call sort of par for the course. It's every year you rotate your gardens, and that's just the rule. So if you grow onions in one patch this year, you don't grow onions there again for at least 2 or 3 years. So it's a 3-year cycle, and that's what I like to do. That's why I like to grow in bins, raised bins. I like to have sort of root crops. I like to have sort of 3 beds in the ground if I can, even if they're small, that's okay. But 3 beds in the ground and 3 bins above ground. And then the plants that really love the warm soils, I'll grow in those raised bins. And then the plants that I know, like some of the root crops, they like a little bit cooler soil, so I'll grow those in the earth. And so what I can do with that is have my cooler crops in the ground, and then I can rotate them because I have 3 beds. I can just rotate them from bed to bed to bed each year, shifting one to the right or one into the wherever the gap is. Just move in that direction. Same with the bins. Just rotate one to the left each year, and really helpful. A lot of the pests that we have that live in the gardens will be burrowing, laying eggs, or even little cocoons right at the base of the plant. And so you just know if you are starting to notice pest buildup, really got to rotate those crops. And I know it's difficult for people who have they don't have a lot of space. But what I say there is try moving some of those plants into containers for one season. So if I had a problem with onion maggot or something, I know that onion maggot comes from the air. It's a little fly that flies in. So I know I have to have an insect mesh, like a mesh over top of that. So that's number one. But if you ever have an onion maggot problem, then they still lay their eggs right there in the soil nearby. And so you do have to rotate those crops. That's the way it goes. But it's really fun. I'm finding this year is a great year for vegetable gardening. Still some issues that are popping up as far as the sun scorch and whatnot, but it's just happening, and everything else should be fine. So we're looking forward to the continued warmth and heat, but it's just got to water a little bit differently. Have to pay a little bit closer attention to it. So we're going to take a short break here, and we do invite your calls, 862-2525, on any topic to do with gardening today. Pruning, there is some summer pruning going on, so if you have questions about that, give us a call. So we'll be back right after these messages with more AM 1150 Garden Show. righty, we are back. Ken Salvail here today, and we are talking about gardening, and we do have some callers calling in, and you can be a caller too. Just call 862-2525, and you can get through to us today. And we have Phil on line one. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you fine, yeah.
Yes, thanks for taking my call. I was just calling about good old cucumbers. I have cucumbers in this year.
Mm-hmm.
I have them in pots. I've had 2 already. Questions about cucumbers. Are they in the same family as pumpkins and zucchini as far as just upkeep and watering repair? And the other question that I had was how to pollinate myself, and is pruning an asset with cucumbers during the course of the summer?
Right. Yes. Well, they are. The answer to your question is they are part of the same family, and they do have the same sort of requirements, which is just really bright light, relatively regular food supply, but consistent watering is the key to success and having nice sweet fruits. And so, what was your second question? I'm sorry, I was distracted there.
That's okay. I was just a couple. It was one, how to pollinate. Like they're getting pollinated. There's obviously the little gaffers are around to pollinate them.
Yeah.
But I've manually pollinated the pumpkins and anyway, can I do that with cucumbers? They're just so small.
Yes, you can. The key with that is that with both this whole family, what they do is when they start sending out runners and creepers, they'll send out their shoots and they start growing along. And the first flowers that open are always the male flowers.
Okay.
And that's to encourage the insects to start coming around and collecting pollen, right? And so they do that first. So what you really have to do is sort of look to identify the female flowers when they come on. And the female flowers are usually a little bigger, and they'll have different parts, like more like a pistil in the middle of the flower where you can pollinate. You can put the pollen on. And so it's one of these things you got to make sure that you're finding the male flowers, which will be closer to the base of the plant sort of thing. And you'll get the pollen onto your Q-tip or toothbrush or whatever it is you'd like to use, a little paintbrush sometimes. And then you can go out and you'll find those bigger, a little bit nicer looking flowers will be the female flowers, and you'll want to pollinate those ones. So it's part of the thing is that first you get all male flowers. So it really doesn't matter how much pollinating you do, you really don't get any more fruit. But also look at the base of the flower, and you will see like a little miniature fruit there. So whatever the fruit is, whether it's pick your squash or whatever, and you'll see a little miniature one there. You'll know that's a female.
And if there are cucumbers there, that doesn't necessarily, the little gaffers, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to grow big, because they may just be started, but unless that little one's pollinated, they'll just die off like the zucchinis do sometimes.
Yes, yeah. But remember with the zucchinis especially, they're so fast growing that they often suffer from that calcium deficiency. So we have to spritz the baby zucchinis and cucumbers with a calcium water. And how you do that is you can buy what's called food grade calcium, or you can also just buy they've got vitamins that you can buy in the store that say they're calcium tablets. And that's what you want, food grade. And you just crush them up, dissolve them in the water, and then you spritz it right onto the fruit itself. It works great for tomatoes, cucumbers, and zucchinis especially. And that's what happens is that fruit starts to go, and then it just disintegrates. So
right onto the flower itself.
Yeah, you bet. Well, right onto the fruit as soon as that fruit starts to form a little bit.
Okay, right on the fruit.
But it certainly doesn't hurt to spritz it onto the plant, because remember, the plant's having a hard time taking up calcium from the roots. So when you spray it right onto the leaves, they absorb it through the leaves, and they can recirculate it and use it where they need it.
Okay, very well. And as pruning, just a last quick question.
Yep.
Somebody else called in here. Pruning, what is the deal there? Is there any way I can get my production up by pruning once it gets growing?
Well, it's a little difficult because as the vine grows, and once it's got ample male flowers, then it starts to produce female flowers. And it's almost like the longer you let that vine grow, the more of these female flowers will be produced, and then the more fruit you'll get. So you'll get to a point where the plant might be slowing down, and you have to decide if you're going to pinch the top of it out or not. But my tendency is to let the thing just grow whatever it wants to grow. The more leaves it has, the more more energy it has to put into fruit production. So
Right.
I really don't prune them too much.
Okay, and as far as putting them on trellis, they're in pots and they're hanging over the side and they seem to be sturdy enough that nothing snaps off because I've had two of them.
Yeah.
Is it better to put it on trellis or just let it do its thing after it hangs over the pot?
It's really a training thing. If you're good at training them, like you can connect them all the way up about every 6 inches, then you can grow them on a trellis, and especially if your trellis is sturdy. But growing on the ground, you don't have to worry about that. But of course, your fruit's laying on the ground, and there's insects that might want to eat them and whatnot. So it can be more of an issue.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks so much. And as far as they hang tough right through until the end of till frost comes?
Not really. They don't like it as soon as it cools down a bit. They're out of here. So it's not like, well, the squashes keep going and going and going, but sometimes the cucumbers, they're a little more finicky and they quit early. So by the time you get mid-September, you want to be wrapping her up, I think.
Okay, thanks for the great information. Have a great day.
No problem. Thanks for calling. Take care.
Goodbye.
All right, and we're going to take another quick call. We do have Dan Bruce waiting here, and but we're going to go to Laura. Good morning, Laura.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
So I have a question about my green beans. Last year was the first year that I grew them by seed, and they were just prolific, like absolutely wonderful.
Yep.
So I put them back, actually, and I was just listening to your this morning where you said to move them, but put them back in exactly the same spot this year.
Yeah.
And the seedlings, I had to actually reseed them because something ate like all of the seedlings. I thought, that was really strange. I thought maybe it was slugs, but I don't think it was slugs. And I think then I started to do some research, and I'm thinking it was like those roly-poly beetles.
Yeah.
So then the plants have grown, but the stems that are in the ground are totally, like I'm going to say, decimated. And these roly-polies and a variety of beetles are all around the stem and inside, and I go in every morning and scoop them out, but like, what do I do?
Yeah,
I'm going to lose them, obviously, because they're just going to eat the whole stem.
Oh, they're unbelievable. I had the exact same problem last year, and it was a new planting of beans. They were the bush beans, and that whole bed where they were growing, because I filled a whole, like a 4x8 bin with just solid beans, and these little pill bugs are called, or sow bugs. And they used to only eat decomposing material, so they were really easy, and they were like, you didn't have to worry about them. But I found them going up and chewing their way through these stems and actually falling the bean plant like it was a tree. And they would chew through it, fall the bean plant, and then they'd all crawl all over it and eat the beans and eat the stems and the leaves and everything.
Yeah.
I've never seen such a thing. But the only thing I would say is, that's another reason why you want to rotate your crops, is because their population will build up in a certain area. And also, whenever a plant dies or if there's any debris that hits the surface of the soil, you have to remove it right away, because these insects will build up populations in those areas. And then, of course, if you get a higher population, pretty much anything you put in there, they're going to eat it. So it's really tough with these things. They are getting more and more aggressive, and unfortunately, we could put insect nets on for the flying insects, but it's difficult. What you do with these sow bugs, though, is you take like a cup, like a little plastic coffee cup or any kind of a cup, and you bury it in the ground so that it's at flush with the surface of the ground, and you can just leave it basically empty. But some people will throw, maybe a little piece of a bean or something down in the bottom of it. But these little guys at night, they go nuts and they crawl all over the place, and they end up falling into these cups. And you can fill a cup up, about a third full in just one night. So what I would be doing is putting a lot of those little cups in, burying them into the ground so they're empty, but burying them in so that the surface or the rim of the cup is level with the surface of the soil. And that will gather quite a few of these guys. And they'll get trapped in there, and then you just have to get rid of them in the daytime.
Oh, okay, so instead of me scooping out every morning with a spoon,
yeah, or you could
what I've been doing is just putting them into a plastic cup, and they can't get out of it. And so I'm just kind of watching them dry up.
Some people put a little blob of vegetable oil in there or something just to help speed up the process. So
they do. Because then I was reading like on the different Facebook groups, gardening groups, and they said, they're all they do is kind of eat and they're good because they eat the decaying but So I don't know whether they were the first ones to decimate my green beans or whether it was after the fact. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the number one thing that gets your beans is the climbing cutworms. And they climb up the stem and they chew the stem and they'll take big notches out of the stem. And then they'll also cut off leaves and drop them to the ground. And sometimes they cut the whole plant off and it falls. So like with pole beans, we'll often take, a little plastic cup, like a plastic beer mug or beer cup, and we cut the bottom out of it and we push it into the earth so it sticks up about 2 inches. And then we'll plant our beans inside of that. And it keeps all these little guys away from the stems of the plant. Now, I've never done that for the bush beans, but, I'm starting to think I might want to.
Oh, okay. And I haven't, I don't even know what a cutworm, I haven't seen any worms around.
Yeah, you
just
don't see
all
them.
These beetles, and I just couldn't believe it.
They're
masters.
Masters of disguise. Hard to see. All right, well, thank you so much for calling in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
bye-bye.
Good luck. Bye-bye. All right, so, Gurinder, we're going to take a quick break here, so we'll be back with more AM 1150 Garden Show. Alrighty, we are back, and we do have our weekly caller coming in here. Calling in, it's Dan Bruce is on the line. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Ken.
How are you today?
Well, alive and well.
Fabulous. And you've got a continued topic for us today.
Well, we spoke last week about potatoes, which everybody in the world knows about. Mm-hmm. And I thought this week we could go to something that is quite widespread. It is also essentially a gift of the Incas and their predecessors in Peru, and it concerns Coca-Cola.
Oh, interesting.
So many people end up with French fries and a Coke.
Yes, absolutely.
So a small tree that is native to the eastern Andes, not the highlands like the potato, but much lower down in the tropical rainforest, Erythroxylum coca.
Ooh.
Cultivated extensively by the Incas, who used the leaves as a form of stimulant, tonic, pepper-upper, strengthener. The leaves were collected, dried, pounded into powder, and that way they could be preserved for any length of time if kept dry. Many of the civilizations in Peru use this stuff regularly, and it was known to cut down on your thirst, increase your strength, cut down on hunger, all that good stuff. In the 19th century, the French developed a wine using this as one of the ingredients, a tonic wine, Mariani wine. And in the late 19th century, it was included in the contents of the ingredients of Coca-Cola, which today are supposedly a closely guarded secret. And up until about 1903, 1904, yes, coca leaves, the extract of coca leaves was indeed in there, but not since, because the same plant is the source of the narcotic drug cocaine. That does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that the Incas were addicted to cocaine, because chewing the leaves is one thing, but refining the essential drug is quite a different matter.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Anyway, there are about 3 or 4 species of the tree. Erythroxylum coca is the main one, and it would appear that has in fact been created by Inca agriculture, because it is propagated largely by cuttings. Seed propagation is unreliable.
How long ago are we talking?
Well, there's evidence of its use in Peru going back between 8,000 and 9,000 years.
Wow. Amazing.
And that evidence comes from the coast of Peru, which is on the west face of the Andes, in the what is in fact the driest desert in the world. But there's ample evidence that the people living there were traveling back and forth over the Andes to get access to the products of the rainforest, which included coca.
Wow. Risking life and limb.
To some extent. Yes.
Sort of.
You didn't want to go sideways right up in the high Andes.
Mm. Well, that's very interesting. And so, is that those products, are there derivatives or parts of it used for medicinal use nowadays in modern products?
There may be some current use of the extracts of erythroxylum. I'm not up to speed on the medical aspect of it. But it certainly has had a long history as far as a energizer and tonic is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, the coca, in the name Coca-Cola, that's where it comes from, and it certainly was originally in the drink.
Mm-hmm. Kept people coming back for more, I guess.
Oh yeah. So when Coca-Cola was first marketed, it was advertised in and amongst the patent medicines.
Oh yeah. So that was quite early in the process, because as far as I knew, the whole soft drink thing started right about that time, wasn't it? That they became popular. It was because of the big World Fair or something, where it really took off.
1890s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so they didn't have the well, I guess they probably didn't know what it was at the time. Is that basically, do you think, why they did it, or did they clearly knew what it was? Or?
Oh, certainly they knew quite a bit about it, because information was freely given by the native peoples who were familiar with it for centuries.
Mm.
Yes, I mean, there's no question about it. This particular little tree is the result of what you might call premeditated agricultural development on the part of native Peruvians.
Isn't that fascinating? Yeah. Who would have thought they have, that technology or that foresight and intelligence, I guess, I don't know, in breeding plants. But I think they were that was a big part of their civilization, though.
Well, don't ever underestimate the ingenuity of farmers.
Exactly. True. All right, Dan. Well, that's awesome. That's a very cool topic today, and very interesting, and very major effect on the world. That's for sure.
Well, Coca-Cola is literally everywhere, and that's where it started from. Next week, I thought we would do another perhaps lesser known plant, which would take us into the business of the agriculture practiced by the ancient Maya.
Very good. Well,
but we'll deal with that next week.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dan. I really appreciate you calling in today, and very interesting topic as usual.
We will do it again.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. All righty. There you go, Dan Bruce, and just all these amazing topics that he comes up with each week, and it's been quite a fascinating process. And he always comes up with it. He's so knowledgeable, and it's just so cool to learn about these, where different foodstuffs and whatnot came from. All right, so thanks again, everybody, for hanging in there. I know we got a few callers that are going to be calling back here right after the break, and thanks again for doing that. And for sure, we've got room, though, for sure, if you want to call in, 862-2525 to get through to us today. That's 250-862-2525. You can get through to us here on The Garden Show, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Or if you just have some information about how your plants are doing through all this heat, it's always good to hear, and everybody benefits from hearing about that. All righty, that's that part of the show, and we're going to be back right after these messages with more on the M1150 Garden Show. We are back with you, and it is a beautiful day out there. It's hot. Wear your sunscreen and check those plants. And we're just going to go straight to the phone lines. Thanks for everybody for waiting. And hello, Sally. Are you there?
Good morning.
Good morning.
We have on the west side of our home hosta, hydrangea, and rhododendron. Needless to say, they get that late hot sun.
Yes.
We've put a tent of an old sheet over the rhododendron, but I'm wondering, do we cut out the crispy leaves that have developed, or on all the plants, or do you leave them, or what do you do? Or the hostas are blooming at the moment. Do we cut the flowers off so that they can put more energy into the leaves? Or
No.
I need your advice, please.
Yeah, it's a tough one. But the way that what I do is I look at the leaf and I look at the percentage of the leaf that's been damaged. And so remembering that even a half a leaf is going to produce sugars for the plant. So sometimes what I do is I literally take a pair of scissors out and I just cut off those brown bits. Just, like even say if half of the leaf is brown or crispy on the end or something, I'll just trim that end piece off. And it's just a cosmetic thing, right? So it looks okay. But I always see every leaf as having value, and so I try to keep them. So, but there's a point when it gets maybe over 80% of the leaf is lost, or it's brown. In this case, this big sunburn blotch, which you'll see often on the rhododendrons especially, and then the leaf is pretty much lost. The plant will want to shed that leaf and regrow a new one, but you don't have to, look at it. You can just snip it off if you like, and that's fine.
What about the flowers on the hostas? Do we cut those, or do we?
No, you can just let them be. As long as they're looking okay. If you're enjoying them, I would just keep them. Again, it's just a cosmetic thing. If the flowers get burned off or something, like it's going to be hot again this week. I think they said 36 this week. And you may see blooms like that really finish up quickly. They don't last as long when we have those hot spells. So, yeah.
And what's your advice with regard to our tent? We're creating a different atmosphere, I suppose.
Well,
because,
I think those plants are pretty happy and they really like you. They're just probably so thankful. Typically in those groups of plants like hostas, hydrangeas, and rhododendrons would all prefer to be sort of on the eastern side of the house, maybe in the shade of a tree, or even on the north side of the house. They don't mind the direct sunlight. That's fine, but it's just it's probably a bit much for them during this heat.
So basically you're saying wrong place, wrong plant?
Yeah, well, I would consider relocating them if you had a spot for them, because they would be a lot happier, and you wouldn't have to worry about this at this time. And then you get plants that can really handle that heat and they actually thrive in the heat. So there's lots of good plants for sun. It's actually harder to find those shady plants sometimes.
Could you name a couple? This will be my last question. Can you name a couple of plants that would do really well in this situation?
Well, even in the hydrangea group, if you switch varieties to varieties maybe more like the like, which one is yours, the pinkish colored one, or
it's a mop head?
Yeah,
Macrophylla.
Macrophylla, yeah. So they're the shadier living one. The other varieties, like the PG hydrangeas, they're a little bit bigger. There's actually dwarf forms available now, and they're good in the full sun. And also the Annabelle types. So they're more like white, and then they'll fade to different colors as they move along.
And does really Annabelle has got sort of a, what do they call it, a pinnacle? The kind of flower that it is, a pinnacle.
Yeah, they're called panicles.
Panicles.
Yeah, and they're all actually panicles, just different shapes. So like the Macrophylla is more rounded, almost like the mop head, the round ball. The Annabelle is sort of flattened out a little bit, and still round. And then the actual PG hydrangea, which stands for panicle, is more cone shape.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're all nice, and there's dwarfs available that only get 3 feet high now. Just beautiful.
And what about planting? This, I said last question, but this is the last question.
Yeah.
What about planting at this time of year and with this heat?
Yeah. No, you can do it, but you have to water it every day. So that's the key. If you can go ahead and do your transplanting, but just give them water every day, probably about 3 weeks straight, to get them to establish in this heat.
Great.
All right.
Thank you very much for your help.
Thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Yeah. Bye-bye. All righty. Are we going to go to Jack then? Good morning, Jack. How are you? Thanks for waiting.
Good morning, Ken. Yes, thanks for taking my call. 2 questions. Number one, I have nice green grass, and I want to keep it that way. When is it all right? Is it all right in this heat? Maybe a week or 10 days from now to give fertilizer, or is it not good to do it in the heat?
Well, all I would do as far as that goes, I would say, yes, they love the food, so you can go ahead and feed. It's more of a time of day thing. I think I'd be doing it in the evening once the heat of the day is sort of done, and apply it then, and if you can, run the sprinklers to wash it in, and that just makes sure it settles down to where it needs to be, and then you're good to go.
So what you said is do it in the cooler part of the day, and then water it well.
Water it in, yeah, you bet.
Okay.
Good to go.
Next question, Ken, is petunias.
Yep.
Ever since I went to Leavenworth 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I don't know whether you've been there, but that's the petunia capital of, as well as other things of the world. They're just beautiful.
Amazing. Eh?
And, of course, we have our medians and our hanging baskets.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a lot of baskets myself, both hanging and in pots. And they are well looked after. They're well fed. If it rains hard, if it's going to hail, if it's wind, and the heat, I got them on rollers, and they go under cover.
Perfect.
And they were absolutely spectacular.
Excellent.
But during the heat, under cover, I'm not sure, because I overwatered one, and it's very hard when you get that much foliage to know whether there's too much water or not enough, because overwatering, as far as I'm concerned, is worse than underwatering. You can water again, but you can't get that water out from the pot if it's too drenched.
Yep,
so
right.
Mine are coming back. I'm just wondering whether I should cut them at the ends. They're looking pretty green. There's lots of buds coming. What should I do?
Do you have a lot of dead stems, like
no,
stringiness,
I do not.
or it's pretty good, eh? They're still looking pretty good as far as
they're looking pretty good. They're green, but the flowers are about 20%, 25% of what they were. They were just mass, just like the city ones.
Okay. Yeah. So what you do is, you know how they'll grow out of the top and then they'll hang down off the sides.
Yes.
And it's like each one of those. Think of them as as if you're going to give the thing a haircut.
Yep.
And what I do is I'll take one of the ones that maybe I actually start looking at each string as if it's independent, and I kind of pull them out a little bit, and I look and I go, well, this one's almost finished blooming, whereas these ones have lots of buds on it. So any ones that are kind of looking like they've gone through their program,
yep.
And I cut those back by about 80%.
Okay.
So I literally remove 80% of it, and I just leave a little piece at the top. And then what that'll do is that'll encourage that to start branching out and getting new growth and growing down. And then so I just like a haircut, I would just take one here and then turn it and leave 3 or 4 and then cut another one, maybe cut it a bit longer.
Yep.
Maybe 6 inches. So it's like I'm going through and I'm selectively cutting back some of these branches. And what I'm doing is I'm just encouraging new growth to come on for later on. And those will bloom once they get rolling too, right? So
yeah. Okay. And watering, you just got to be cautious. They got to have enough, but not too much.
Yeah, well, and it's really tough when it's that hot. You literally you're forced to overwater because the poor plants are just they suffer so much. So it's not it's not unusual to overwater plants when it's that hot. I mean, you almost have to.
I know. Just one other thing. I'm sure that you and Dawn are aware of those the big beautiful flowering baskets in the mediums.
Yes. Yep.
Those I happened to talk to a couple of the chaps who were doing some work up at the cemetery, and they are involved with this these hundreds of them throughout the city.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me, I said, how in the world do you water them? And you must be aware, they say they water them from underneath. They've got reservoirs underneath, and they just have to fill them every so often, and the plants suck it up.
Yeah. Yeah, unbelievable. And some of them, they drive around with a big truck, and they have a wand hanging out the door, and the guy shoots it into each planter, and they fill those reservoirs. So they last, I think, about a week. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they come around early in the morning, 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning, 2 o'clock sometimes.
Right, wow.
Very interesting.
Yeah, what goes on at night? You'd never know.
At night. Thanks, Ken.
All right, thanks, Jack. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yep, bye-bye. All right, and we have Linda on the line. Good morning, Linda. Thanks for holding.
Hi, fellows. I have some portulaca, and I realize portulaca likes to be neglected, and I have been working hard at trying to neglect them. But the problem is I'm not getting very many blooms. I'm getting lots of growth, but just the occasional bloom. So I water them maybe twice a week. I don't really saturate them. I just give them a little drink. They're really out in the sun a lot. What am I doing wrong?
Well, it's hard to say. Do you have any kind of a food or feeding program on them, or?
I did have slow-release granules in the ground before I planted them, and I do periodically give them a little fertilizer in the water, but that's it. Yeah,
so what I would do with these guys is I would try to force them just sort of change it up a bit, because what's been going on, I think the twice a week might not be quite enough. Okay. And what they feel like is when they're really dry, even though they like the dry conditions and the hot conditions, their tendency is to not open up those blooms or the buds for fear that it's just too hot and too dry. So they like to see this, like something's changing. The weather's changing, the temperatures are changing, something's going to happen, and it's going to trigger the whole plant to explode into flower. And so what you can do now is just go to a once-a-day watering for a while.
Okay.
And then feeding about every second watering. And this is switch it up. And that switching it up should kick them into gear and get them blooming.
Okay, like fertilize them every second day a bit?
Yeah, just a little bit, yeah, for sure.
Oh, okay. And water every day.
Yeah, and let's just switch it up and see if that makes a difference. And then once they kick in and they start to bloom, and what I would probably do is go to watering every second day.
Okay, great. Yeah. All right, thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, so we're going to take another short break. Again, I do invite your calls, 862-2525, to get through to us today. And give us a call, answer your gardening questions, and let's get at it. It's Saturday. It's time to get out in the garden. All right, we'll be back with more AM 1150 Garbage. We are back with you, and it is a glorious Saturday morning. And I just want to remind people that the Master Gardeners are going to be having their program starting again this fall. So if you're interested in that or learning a little bit more about becoming a Master Gardener, you can go to you can actually just Google Okanagan Master Gardeners, and it'll pop right up. And their website is www.mgabc.org. There you go. Check that out. And also, don't forget to check in with OXA, OXA, which is the Okanagan Xeriscape Association. It's always wise to just check their website from time to time. You can get all kinds of great information about plants, plants that like dry conditions, and also about some of their events that are coming up and programs and classes and all kinds of cool things that they do. So check that out. All right, we're going to go back to the phone lines. We have Muriel on line 1. Good morning, Muriel.
Good morning, Ken.
Good morning.
I got a question at you. I cut, my ivy grew too big. I cut, and I think I got cut too much of it. I only got one leaf. The rest will grow back.
It should. Is there any leaves left at the bottom?
Yes, there is.
Okay, as long as there's leaves, then those leaves are keeping the roots alive and everything, and they'll send out some new shoots and come right back. So it should be fine.
Okay, because I just realized what I just did. I done it in the springtime because it grew too much around the house here, and I thought I'd cut it back like I usually do before I put it outside.
Okay.
But I think I cut too much.
Yeah, well, those vines they're pretty vigorous, so they should come back. But they're slow to start, and then
I got one. It's really growing nicely, but the other is gradually. I see a couple of them there, but not.
Yeah, are you giving them any food or?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I do all the every other watering.
Okay, that should be fine. I think they'll be okay. I think you just have to wait it out. For whatever reason, the one is a bit slower than the other one, and it'll get going. It's just been knocked back a notch.
Yeah. How much water? Because it's a hot heat. I water mine every day for the heat reasons. Is okay?
Yes, that I would expect that to be about right. Just always check it, and if you're finding that it's not using the water, so if you put your finger in and it feels really kind of wet, or if it's getting too soggy, then you skip a day and check it the next day. But
that's what I've been doing, Ken. That's what I've been doing.
Is it drying out then every day?
No. Yes, a couple of them had been drying out. A couple of them are in the hot sun.
Okay.
Because I have no other room. I only got a small balcony. So two of them I put in the front the plates. It's drying out. I have to water that every day.
Yeah, those ones in the hotter spots, they need water every day for sure.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, so I think you're on track. I think it's just a matter of waiting it out and see what happens.
Yeah, and how much water do I put in with my Christmas cactus?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Christmas cactuses, they say in the summertime you just water them freely, and that means that just slightly moist between watering. So probably, is it outside as well?
Yes, it's always outside. Okay. I put it out every year.
Fabulous. Yeah, so I would be checking it every day for sure, and it might need water every day. If you find it's not, if it's not using the water, just skip a day and then get back on track.
Yeah, I put my finger down to where the root is just to make sure it's wet.
Yeah, that's the thing with the Christmas cactuses are a rainforest plant, so they
I've heard about that.
Yeah, they like to have some moisture. That's for sure.
Mine blooms, but every year I put mine out.
Yeah, and that's the secret to getting them to bloom. When you bring them in the fall, they always just kick up a storm and have a beautiful show.
Can I ask you one more question, please?
Sure.
When do you put the cactus in September? Is September okay to put your Christmas cactus back in the house?
Yeah, I aim for about not later than about the 20th of September.
Not later than the 20th of September. I usually put it in the first week in September.
Yeah. I just watch the nighttime temperatures because I want it to cool down. I want to make sure it's cool at night, but not freezing, of course, but down to about...
of course not.
Yeah, if it gets down to about 5 degrees at night, that's enough to trigger it to flower.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Have a good day, Kim.
You too, Muriel. Take care.
Take care.
Yep,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All righty, and we're going to go on to Sophie. Good morning, Sophie. How are you? Hello, Sophie. Are you there?
I have a question about my apricot tree.
Oh, yes, yeah.
It's got apricots on it all over, but they're green as can be.
Yep.
Are they ever going to ripen?
Yes, they will. There are early, mid, and late season apricots, and some of them are very, very late. And so...
Well, see, I've had this tree for many years, and last year by this time we were picking them.
Oh, yeah.
This year, I don't know what's happened to it, but...
I wonder if it's because of the heat, The heat has triggered plants to sort of zoom ahead so fast. It's just triggering. Everything is blooming way earlier than normal. And I wonder if it's too much for those apricots.
Pardon?
I'm wondering if it's too much for the apricots. Is it in a moist area? Has it got moisture?
Well, I'm watering it all the time. Actually, I put the hose on it every now and every other day and just let the water go on, on the roots and that.
Yeah, soak it good. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because you want those apricots to fill up with water, right? But
yes.
I think you're going to see something. Either they're going to give you some color, start to size up a bit. It should be within a week or two at the most. And then if they're not going to make it, they will drop. And they'll just suddenly drop like rain.
Oh, yeah.
So, unfortunately, I'm hoping that they'll come around for you. It's just really
I sure hope so. I would like some. We had tons last year. And this year, I don't know what happened to the tree. We had it cut back quite a bit when the people come to prune them.
Yeah, that's okay.
Well, we had them cut back, the peach tree and the apricot tree, because they were getting too big.
Yeah. Well, it's probably... Yeah, sorry for interrupting, but I think that was a good idea because, apricots, they tend to produce very heavily one year and then not so much the next year, and then heavily the next year and not so much the next year. It's like every second year is a big year. So I think your timing is right on the money for your heavy pruning.
See, they don't have as much this year as they had last year. Like, they're not so heavy. But they're green, and I thought, well, they should be ripening. This is July already, middle of July.
Yeah, hard to say. It's all about weather. So let's tough it out. Maybe call us back in a week or so and just let us know how it's come through, because it's always interesting, for me and I'm sure for listeners to hear how these things progress.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sophie. Take care.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, there you go. It's hard to know what the heck's going out there. What's going on out there with this weather? When it's hot, the plants, they react weirdly. When I was driving into the show this morning, I was noticing the trumpet vines are blooming like crazy. And, usually they don't flower until around the last week of July. And so I'm thinking, wow, those are 2 weeks ahead of normal schedule. And I think they were actually blooming last week, too. So come to think of it, I think they might be 3 weeks ahead. So, that just tells you that how much weather affects the plants. And as I mentioned off the top of the show, is they really can't run and hide from the heat. Sometimes they'll have a happy owner or somebody. They're lucky enough to have somebody who'll put a little umbrella out for them in the heat of the day. But the poor plants, they just have to suffer through. So that has all kinds of effects on them. In the case of the apricots, they have a big crop one year and a small crop the next year, and a big and a small and a big and a small. So, if you had a big crop last year, then you'd expect to have a small crop this year. And I'm hoping that these apricots size up, and hopefully we'll hear back from Sophie and we'll figure that one out. Alrighty, well, thanks again for everyone who's calling in, and we definitely have some room on the switchboard now. If you have any other questions, 250-862-2525 to get through to us today, so give us a call, and we'll answer your gardening questions, and we'll be back right after these messages with more AM 1150 Village. Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. And we are just all excited about gardening this year. It's amazing. This heat is good for the hot plants, the plants that love the heat. But now all of our lettuces and spinach and things are all bolting and going to seed. And same with the cilantro. I always used to get the one called slow bolting cilantro because it would be a little bit slower. But, it's still bolted. Same idea. Yeah, I just want to mention right away, if anybody is interested, if you go to YouTube and you like to watch YouTube videos, you can go to YouTube and you can look up our website on there. It's just called Grower Coach on YouTube, and we have all kinds of videos there, gardening videos. And just put out a new one here this morning. It's all about Don Burnett's cactus. Don has this incredible cactus collection, and particularly some very large ones. His cholla cactus, and he's talked about it quite a bit on the show here, and I was able to do a quick little video with him the other day, and so we've just put that up onto YouTube. It's called Cold Hardy Cactus, and you can check that out, and Don explains how he grows his cactus, and it's pretty nice. He does a great job, and they are beautiful, and the flowers are amazing, so really, really nice. All right, so we're going to go back to the phone lines. We're going back to line 1. We have Donna on the line. Good morning, Donna.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Our son has a peach tree in his backyard, about 2, maybe 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And last year they had about 2 peaches on it, and this year it was loaded, so they thinned it out a lot.
Good.
And he's been watering it a lot, but the peaches aren't growing at all.
Oh, yeah. It sounds like this similar syndrome that Sophie was talking about, that her apricots were not sizing up. It's hard to say. The one thing with peaches is that there's quite a variety. The early peaches are almost ready right now. I think they come ready about the middle of July. And the late ones, though, the later varieties don't come ready until literally the end of September. So,
I wonder, well, maybe, because the peaches are they're not much bigger than a golf ball sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, well, they might still size up.
I can't remember when they did actually get some.
Yeah.
Can you overwater it?
Well, the key is when you water peach trees or any fruit tree is that you water nice and deep. So that means that when you're watering, what I do is I use a drip technique. So that's where I just throw my hose underneath it and it's just dripping. And I'll put it in one spot for about an hour, and I'll move it over 3 feet and put it there for an hour, and then move it around the other side for an hour. And I kind of just trying to moisten. I always stay out from the trunk at least 2 feet or so. The bigger the tree is, the farther out from the trunk I go. And I want to soak down deep so that the tree can survive this heat. And with fruit, the first thing that happens is if you're not watering enough, the fruit will generally split when you water it. And that's one of the symptoms that they're not getting consistent watering. Okay. And so if the fruit's not splitting and it's holding on and you're watering it, I don't think that overwatering is really a problem.
Yeah, it shouldn't be.
Yeah, what the orchardists do is they'll turn their sprinklers on and they run it for like 24 hours. Of course, they're doing it. This is their system, right? But they run it for 24 hours, typically once a week. And so it gets literally 24 hours of water, which is quite a bit, down deep. So they'll be watering down about maybe 12 to 18 inches. And then they get that once a week. Now, I'm not sure if once the peach trees start to ripen, as they start to get filled up, they suddenly see them to enlarging, that they might increase that a little bit, meaning they might switch to twice a week. But so for you, about every second day should be about right, I would say.
Okay, every second. And so water more out further, not just right at the base of the tree.
Yes, yeah. So with trees, right at the trunk, where the trunk goes into the ground, that's a spot where they don't need the water unless it's brand new. If it's newly planted, you have to water right at the trunk. But once they're in for a few years, their roots are spreading out 4 or 5 feet in all directions. So, you want to soak that area. So that's why I say I always move just a dripping hose around, and I let it drip so it slowly soaks nice and deep.
So better, like to maybe, except if you have to move it, but I was going to say leave it overnight when it's cool and you're watering it, sort of thing.
Yeah. That's the recommendation for watering is always when it's not too hot.
Yeah.
Because it's you don't want to lose your water to evaporation.
Yeah, it's just evaporating if you.
Yeah. So again, the dripping slowly is more efficient than just dumping a bunch of water on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll pass along the message.
Okay. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Thanks for calling. Bye-bye. There you go. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm wondering how many fruit trees out there are having issues, with this heat. I mean, it's definitely affecting plants, but fruits are going to be affected. There's no doubt about it. I know I've seen sunburn showing up on peppers and tomatoes. So that's where you get this sort of a white spot that forms where it's exposed to the sun. And that white spot kind of rots, and it starts you can tell the fruit is degrading. So sunburn is not a happy thing on people, and it's also not a happy thing on fruit. And unfortunately, there's not too much you can do about it. The peaches in the past, we used to run a peach orchard for quite a few years, actually, and where I had to be more intimately involved in. And it was funny that the peaches that were exposed to the sun were always sweeter and nicer and earlier. And the peaches that were kind of hidden in the leaves were later, and they wouldn't come on as early, and they would stay green longer. So it was kind of a good thing because then we could go and pick all the ripe ones and then come back and pick all the next, it was like once every 3 days you could have a picking. And then the ones that were really hidden in the shade, they were right at the end of that picking. So they were the least ripened ones. But it was still interesting. I can recall actually going and opening up some of the peaches by removing a few leaves here and there, just not to put them in full sun, but to give them a little bit more light, and it seemed to urge them along a little bit. So yeah, it's a real interesting thing. This whole understanding of newly planted plants that need water every day, pretty much, and plants that have been in for years and years, they need sort of less water, but deeper water less often. And so you treat them quite a bit differently. And plants, like I mentioned off the top of the show, like sometimes the junipers and that sort of thing, they're drought tolerant to begin with. And if they've been around for years and years, there's really no point in watering them at all. They really don't need the water. And it's always surprising that at the base of the plant, where the trunk goes into the ground, is not typically where the plants are uptaking most of their water. The plants will usually take in most of their water somewhere around the drip line of the plant, which is the outer part, so the width of a tree, the farthest out edges of where the leaves are, that's where they'll uptake a lot of their water, most of their water. And same even with a juniper or something that grows, say it's growing about 8 or 10 feet across, a big old juniper. Well, it's around that outer edge there. It's still got a drip line, and that's still where they're going to take most of their water up from. So if you have a lawn that's nearby your cedar hedge, or a lawn that goes around your juniper bed, and that lawn is nice and moist because you're keeping the grass alive, well, you can bet that those plants have their roots out under the lawn there, and they're taking advantage of that as well. So that's a real important factor. I often say to people, I always say, just think about it. When you're out walking in the park, and then it's all of a sudden there's a bit of a storm, and it starts to rain, and so you go stand underneath the tree for a while just to get out of the rain and let the rain pass. And it's kind of telling you something that tree is got a strategy there to keep itself dry under the tree. And it's taking all the rain that's hitting the leaves are bouncing from leaf to leaf to leaf to leaf all the way out and dropping straight down at the drip line. That's why they call it the drip line. And it drops right down, and there's specialized roots sitting right at the surface there to grab that water. So that's where they want the water. And underneath the tree, around the trunk, is I think of it as their breathing hole. That's where they breathe oxygen. So you don't really want to be flooding that with water because that's where they breathe from. That's where the oxygen comes into the soil. So I always think of trees a little bit differently. I think of underneath the tree is okay to dry out, but around the outer perimeter is where if you want to water them, that's where you water them. So young trees are newly planted, you got to water right at the trunk. But as they get older, you sort of keep moving that water outwards, and you're focusing most of your water on the outer perimeter. Now, that brings to mind, how are these trees surviving out on the streets? You know, it's just amazing that you'll see these trees, and that's why they call them, they're street trees, but they have this little tiny box opening at the base of them, and that's where the water gets applied, you know, through automatic irrigation. And it's quite fascinating to see those trees and how they survive and what they go through. And that's why when people choose like a street tree, like if you're part of the city or municipalities, they choose specific species that are known to be probably more drought tolerant and more tolerant of really sort of tough growing conditions. So you can't just use any tree for a street tree, but they definitely want to pick the tough ones that'll survive. So anyway, on that note, we're going to take a short break here. So we're going to take that break. We may have time for one or two more calls, 862-2525. So we'll take a short break, and we'll be back with more AM 1150 Garbage. Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. And we're going right back to the phone lines. We have Pierce on line one. Good morning, Pierce.
Good morning. How are you, Ken? I have a quick question for you about my cherry tree.
Sure.
And cherry tree and worms in the cherries. For the past number of years, I've got one tree in my backyard, and for the past number of years, I've had professional sprayers come in and spray it with very, very mixed results.
Right.
This year, I went to Buckerfeld's and they suggested I try malathion on it because that's the only spray I could get. I used the malathion, and I have a 100% success rate. I have no worms in the cherries. Is it because there are not many worms in cherries this year, or do you think my malathion is working?
Well, you know, I hate to say it, but did you applied it yourself, though, right?
Oh, I did, yeah.
Yeah, so do you think maybe you did a better job than they did?
I did a better job, and I also got it there at the right time every time. I did it 3 times.
Well, that's the thing. Like I know that we have to use these services because they do a great job, and they run by a clock. You know, they're going to be there. But the thing is that there's some room for error in there, and that they have such a big schedule, and there's so many places they have to do that sometimes they just miss, and they're not in the right spot at the right time. Whereas as a homeowner, you can do it when you need to do it and take care of it, right?
And is malathion a good product to put on the cherries then?
Well, it is recommended. I suggest that when you use like that's sort of one of the older style pesticides, I would just suggest doing a little bit of research on it, always being up to date with what the latest information is on those. And from my understanding is they're saying that as long as you're buying new product, that it's okay. But anybody who has old malathion that's in their storage areas, that they recommend taking it in and handing it in through the pesticide collection program that they have, and find out more about that. But the old product becomes quite toxic and poisonous to everybody, so you can't keep it for a long time. Only lasts for 1 year, that's it.
Okay, wonderful. Well, listen, I really appreciate your help because, I mean, all the cherries on the sun side of my tree are just frazzled with that heat wave we had. Yeah. But the ones on the other side are excellent, very good cherries, and not a worm in sight this year. So I'm very pleased.
Sounds great. And remember to follow that cycle. That typically what you do is as soon as you see the cherry starting to get just the slightest little blush of pink, that's when you hit it, and then you follow the label recommendations. They'll often say repeat it every 7 days or something.
Every 7 days, and then leave 7 days before you eat the fruit and wash it well.
Yep, you betcha.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Jen. Appreciate the help.
Okay, thanks, Pierce. Yep, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Alrighty, we'll go back to the phone lines, and we have Teresa on the line. Good morning, Teresa.
Good morning, Ken.
Good morning.
Thanks for taking my call.
Mm-hmm.
I've got two quick questions. I've got the garden, and I've got some cucumbers and tomato plants and beet plants and stuff. And greenery, the leaves and everything is growing just fine. But it's flowering very little. And if it does flower, the flowers just fall off. Like, what can I do to fix this problem?
To help it, eh? On which plants are the flowers falling off? Just the beans?
Yeah, especially the cucumbers and the tomatoes.
Okay. So what happens with those is sometimes the flowers that they produce will drop, especially if they're sort of the earliest ones that come on. And like say with like with the cucumbers especially, they'll send out some of these all male flowers, so there's no female flowers, so they're not going to be producing fruit from those. So the male flowers will drop, and so you're wondering, well, how come it's not producing any fruit, and they just dropped. So that's sort of part of that sort of natural process. So again, it's just sort of waiting it through until the female flowers really start to being produced, and then all of a sudden you'll start getting some fruit. But on the other plants, like the beans, they will drop because of the heat sometimes. They'll just shed some of the flowers, and they're waiting for a little bit of a cool spell, and then all of a sudden they'll start to produce really well. Mm-hmm. And then with the tomato plants, if you get a truss of fruit, and when the fruit is produced, the little flowers that open on the truss, often the very first ones that are produced may drop or fall, and then the ones sort of towards the end of the truss might set. But what are you noticing?
Yeah, well, I try to, pollinate them myself. Mm-hmm. And when I do, I just touch them, and the flower just falls off.
Oh, okay.
So it seems to have, the foliage is great. Mm. So it's probably getting too much nitrogen, and I was thinking what can I do to amend that?
Well,
it would produce more flowers?
Yeah. Do you use a fertilizer right now? Do you ever use the 15-30-15 water soluble fertilizers?
No.
Yeah, that's really one of the best ones. Because I don't know, you've listened to the show over the years, and you may have heard. Yes. Yeah, you may have heard us talking about how boron is deficient in the Okanagan. And so boron is one of these nutrients that you have to be very careful with, because any amount of boron that exceeds really micro amounts can be quite toxic to plants. But yet, if they don't have it in tiny, tiny quantities, the plant can't produce any fruit, and it'll often shed its flowers. So that's why we'll often recommend a water-soluble fertilizer, and something that's a 15-30-15 ratio. It doesn't really matter the company so much, but if it's water-soluble, so it's like the blue stuff, you mix it with water, and then you fertilize the plant with it. And you can even get some right on the leaves, like you can pour it over the plant. Mm-hmm. And then because these water-soluble fertilizers have all the nutrients in them, including boron, that you're kind of bypassing the roots and getting right through the leaves a bit, and that will help them set fruit, and it'll help the plant actually produce better flowering and fruiting. So that would be a something you can try.
So overwatering, I water them every day, and I think maybe I'm overwatering them, or what's going on, because the green, I'm repeating myself here. Yeah. The leaves are great. It's just growing leaves like crazy.
Right.
But it's just not blooming.
Yeah, no, I don't think I don't think it's the overwatering. I think that you have to water regularly on all vegetable plants to keep them happy and to keep the fruit nice and sweet when the fruit does come. So they prefer a once a day watering, but I think you just got a little bit of a nutrient thing going on there, and I think if you could just let this go for 1 week, if there's a way you could, I'm not sure if you have any of that water soluble, even if you had 20-20-20 or something, you could try that. Any water soluble fertilizer, and get some of that onto the, mix it up in the water and put it over the whole plant. And then see what happens by next weekend, and see if it's making any difference. Maybe call us back then and see what's happening, if anything's progressing.
Well, I can tell that some of it got sunburned. There are some little tomatoes.
Oh, yeah.
And they just turned white.
Yes, that's sunburn.
So they won't grow anymore.
They should produce some new flowers. Depending on the variety, you should get some more blooms. So,
but that white fruit, that's done.
It's done.
Cooked.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for calling, Teresa. I really appreciate that. And maybe we'll talk to you next weekend. Oh, all righty. Okay, thanks again. And, on that note, we're going to go here and wrap up this show. So we're going to go right to the tips of the week. And my tip of the week this week is to remove the deadheads from all plants, including the, we do it on our perennial plants, we do it on our annual plants, and we also do it on weeds as well, because weeds produce these seed heads that are just full of thousands of seeds. And for all the same reasons, we don't want our regular plants to become weeds, and we don't want the weeds to spread around. So you can just use a little bucket and go out there and tear the heads off all those weeds before they go to seed and before they start shedding their seed everywhere. All right, now my plant of the week this week was the basil plant, which is happy in this heat. And just remember, when you're growing basil, it's got to be warm. There's no rush in putting basil out into the garden. We have cold soils up until June. This year, I'm sure they didn't even respond until about the middle of June. So no rush getting the basil out, and boy, they are loving it now. So this is basil season, and we're looking forward to a good crop. All right, that's our tips and plans for this week. Remember to check growercoach.com, and remember to check Grower Coach on YouTube. We have all kinds of videos there that are helpful for people in the garden and answering gardening questions, and just searching out things. We often will be profiling plants. I do some pictures of my own garden. I have actually some videos there with Don Burnett and his greenhouse and that sort of thing. So if you want to learn more about us and just see some more of what's going on in the background, you can just go to YouTube and look up Grower Coach. And we're there, and we'll be good to go. All right, so that's it for this week. Thanks so much for everybody who called in. It's been a fabulous week, and we'll talk to you again next week with more AM 1150 Garbage.